Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going on a journey exploring a potential future for Britain, one where the housing crisis is just a distant memory.
Intriguing, right. Instead of just kind of looking at those dry policy proposals, we're going to step into a time machine and see what a Britain that's actually solved its housing problems could look like in 2035.
Yeah, we're going to see how this author envisions the real-world impacts of some pretty radical changes. And let me tell you, some of the outcomes are pretty surprising. Lower house prices, lower rents, shorter social housing waits, even more dynamic economy, maybe even a less politically divided society.
Sounds almost utopian, doesn't it? But to get to this brighter future, we first need to understand the pretty bleak reality of Britain before this fictional housing revolution.
Okay, so paint me a picture. How bad was the housing situation?
Well, imagine this. In the early 2020s, England alone was short a staggering 3.4 million homes just to reach the EU average. And to make matters worse, British homes were already unusually small compared to other developed nations.
Wow. So not just a shortage of homes, but tiny homes on top of that. That's a double whammy
Right.
for anyone trying to find a decent place to live. I can see why people were feeling squeezed.
Exactly. And that squeeze was felt most acutely in the cost of housing. House prices tripled in just 25 years, while wages lagged far behind, leaving homeownership a distant dream for many.
It's like a cruel time warp, right? Almost like we've gone back to the Victorian era in terms of affordability.
That's a striking comparison, and this author actually highlights research showing that housing affordability in England had indeed regressed to levels last seen in the late 1800s.
Yeah. It wasn't just buying that was a problem, though, was it?
Yeah,
I mean, renting was just as bad, especially in London.
absolutely. London had some of the highest rents in the world, even surpassing many other European capitals. And the problem wasn't confined to London. Smaller cities across the UK were also becoming increasingly unaffordable.
So you've got this situation where owning a home is out of reach. Renting is eating up huge chunks of people's income, and social housing has these ridiculously long waiting lists. What's fascinating to me is how the author connects this housing crisis to broader economic and social problems. It's not just about finding a roof over your head, is it?
That's right. The author argues that this housing crisis was like a virus, right, infecting every aspect of British life. Think about it. Businesses struggling with high rents were forced to pass those costs on to consumers, driving up prices for everything.
So everything from my morning coffee to my weekly groceries was more expensive because of the housing shortage. That's wild.
Precisely. And it gets even more interesting when you consider the impact on labor mobility. People might have wanted to move to areas with better job opportunities, but the sky-high housing costs in those areas made it almost impossible.
It's like we've recreated the medieval statute of laborers, where workers were tied to their land.
Yeah.
But today it's not legal restrictions. It's sky-high housing costs that are keeping people trapped.
Exactly. This lack of mobility stifled the economy, dampened productivity, and widened the gap between the rich and the poor. Housing costs became a huge burden for low-income families, pushing them further into poverty and even homelessness.
And I imagine all of this added fuel to the fire of political polarization, especially among younger generations who felt locked out of the housing market.
Absolutely. They saw this housing crisis as a symptom of a broken system, blaming capitalism for their struggles and becoming increasingly disillusioned with the status quo. You can see how this was a recipe for social unrest.
So we've got a pretty grim picture here, a housing crisis with tentacles reaching into every aspect of British life. But according to this author, there's a turning point. A new government comes to power in 2024, a YMBY government that decides to finally tackle this crisis head on.
That's right. And unlike previous governments, that seem content to just tinker around the edges, this new government was ready to launch a full-blown housing revolution.
Okay, a YMB government ready to launch a housing revolution. I'm intrigued, but also a bit skeptical. What exactly did they do, that was so revolutionary?
Well, for starters, they understood that simply setting housing targets like previous governments had done wasn't enough. They needed to incentivize local communities to get on board with building more homes. So they got creative with something called planning gain.
Hold on. You're gonna have to explain that one for me. What exactly is planning gain, and why should I care about that?
Oh, it's pretty simple. Planning gain is it's the increase in land value. That comes with development permission.
Yeah.
So if you're a landowner and you get permission to build apartments on your property, well, the value of that land, it goes up
Yeah.
significantly. Traditionally, most of that gain, it went to developers, but this government decided, they decided to make sure that communities got a share of it.
Ah, so it's like, hey, we know you might not, you might not love the idea of more housing in your neighborhood, but how about some extra cash for your schools
Yeah.
or parks, or even lower taxes?
Yeah.
Suddenly those new homes don't look so bad, huh?
Exactly. They realized that people were more likely to support development if they could see tangible benefits, right, for their community. And they went even further, using mechanisms like community land auctions, where councils would buy land, grant permission, and then auction it off, with the profits going back to the community.
So it's like they were cutting out the middleman
Yeah.
and making sure that the community, not just developers, was benefiting from the development boom. That's a pretty savvy move. But wasn't there pushback from people who
Yes.
wanted to protect green spaces?
Of course, yeah. There were concerns about development encroaching on green belts, those protected areas around cities. But this government took a more nuanced approach. They recognized that much of the green belt wasn't actually green space, but
Yeah.
often underutilized land that could be put to better use.
So they started strategically releasing greenbelt land, right,
Yeah.
near commuter stations, making the most of existing infrastructure and capitalizing on land.
Yeah.
That wasn't really serving much of a purpose anyway.
Precisely. And they didn't stop there. They also targeted a somewhat controversial land use, golf courses.
Golf courses. Really?
Yeah.
That seems like a bold move considering how attached some people are to their golf.
Well, the author argues that golf courses were receiving a sort of hidden subsidy, right, from the planning system, keeping valuable land artificially cheap and out of reach for housing development. By granting automatic permission, right, for development on golf courses, they removed that subsidy and opened up this land for much needed homes.
Okay, I have to admit, targeting golf courses is it is a bold move. It sounds like this government was willing to challenge the status quo and make some tough choices. But did they just focus on building in existing urban areas?
Not at all. They also revived the new towns policy, but with a modern twist. They created entirely new communities designed for, the way people live and work today, with walkable, mixed-use neighborhoods. And crucially, these new towns were driven by private investment, not top-down government planning.
So it's like the best of both worlds, right? You get the ambition and scale of a new town, but with the efficiency and innovation of the private sector. What a great idea. Did they do anything to simplify the planning process itself? I've heard horror stories about how complicated and time-consuming it can be to get planning permission in the UK.
They did. They shifted towards a more rules-based zoning system, which made planning decisions much more transparent and predictable, right? This removed a lot of the uncertainty that had discouraged development in the past.
It sounds like this YMBY government really pulled out all the stops. They incentivized communities, got creative with land use, streamlined the planning process, and even took on the sacred cow of golf courses.
They were committed to tackling the housing crisis from every angle, and according to this author, their efforts paid off in a big way.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat.
Yeah.
Let's fast forward to 2035 and see what this post-revolution Britain looks like. All right, we've set the stage. We've seen the revolution unfold. Now let's step into that time machine and experience Britain in 2035. What's the most striking difference in this new world?
What jumps out is the sense of hope, especially among young people. Home ownership rates are actually climbing again, making that dream of a property-owning democracy a reality for new generations.
It's almost like a sigh of relief, right?
Yeah.
This generation that had been burdened by the housing crisis can finally exhale and start building a future.
Yeah, and it's not just homeowners who are benefiting, right? Renters are in a much stronger position too. With a flood of new housing on the market, landlords are now competing for tenants, offering better deals and more choices.
Can you imagine that? Landlords having to woo renters instead of the other way around? That'd be a real shift in power dynamics.
Exactly. And those long social housing waiting lists we talked about, they've shrunk dramatically. People are getting access to safe, affordable homes much faster.
It's like this author has taken all the worst aspects of the housing crisis and just flipped them on their head. What a powerful vision. But does it stop there? I mean, surely this housing revolution had ripple effects beyond just the housing market, right?
Absolutely. The author argues that this had a profound impact, right, on the entire economy. Businesses no longer burdened by high rents were able to invest more, innovate more, and create more jobs.
Yeah, it's like that old saying, a rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah.
When people have a decent place to live, it unlocks their potential and allows them to contribute more fully to society.
And remember how we talked about high housing costs driving up consumer prices? Well, in this 2035, we're seeing the opposite effect with lower rents for businesses, prices for everything from food to retail have actually come down.
So not only are people saving money on housing, but that everyday expenses are lower too. It's like a double dose of economic relief. What's fascinating to me is the social impact. The author even suggests that this housing revolution helped to reduce political polarization.
That's right. Younger generations, now able to afford a decent place to live, are feeling less resentful, less locked out, right, of the system. There's a sense of optimism about the future.
It's amazing how something as fundamental as housing can just weave into so many aspects of our lives. It really underscores how interconnected these issues are.
And there's even an environmental upside. The author highlights that this rejuvenation of the housing stock led to much greater energy efficiency, reducing carbon emissions and contributing to a more sustainable future.
It's like a win-win-win situation. But I have to ask, didn't anyone worry about the impact of all this building on the environment?
Of course, there were concerns. Some people feared that all this development would lead to urban sprawl and the destruction of precious green spaces. But the author points out that even after this building boom, less than 10% of England's land mass was developed.
So it's not a case of choosing between housing and the environment. It's about finding a balance, a way to meet our needs while also preserving the natural world.
And the author leaves us with a powerful takeaway. If Britain could overcome this seemingly insurmountable housing crisis, what other seemingly intractable problems, right, might we be able to solve with a similar mix of bold policy changes and public support?
It really makes you think, doesn't it? It's a call to action, a reminder that we're not powerless in the face of complex challenges. We can create a better future, but it takes vision, courage, and a willingness to challenge the status quo.
I think that's a great note to end on. This thought-provoking journey into a potential future reminds us that the solutions to even our most daunting problems might be closer than we think.
Thank you for joining us on the Deep Dive. We hope this exploration has sparked your curiosity, inspired you to imagine new possibilities for the world around us. Be sure to subscribe for more deep dives into fascinating topics.
Until next time.